The first signs of change in Rachel Carter's life appeared so quietly that she almost ignored them, like small ripples on a calm lake that seem harmless until they slowly grow into something deeper. Rachel was 37 and lived in a peaceful neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, where tree-lined streets and soft, rainy mornings made the city feel calm and reflective. She worked as a librarian at a local community library, a job she loved because it allowed her to spend her days surrounded by stories about people, choices, love, and heartbreak. Rachel often believed books understood human emotions better than most people did. Ironically, she never expected her own life to slowly begin resembling the complicated stories she once shelved on quiet afternoons. 5 years earlier, she had married Daniel Carter, a confident and hardworking real estate agent who was well known in the Portland property market. Daniel was charming, ambitious, and deeply focused on building a successful career. When Rachel first met him, she admired his determination and the way he spoke about creating a secure future. Their early relationship had been full of excitement. They explored new restaurants around the city, drove along the Oregon coast on spontaneous weekend trips, and spent long evenings talking about dreams for the future. But Daniel also came with an important part of his life, his teenage son, Liam. Liam had been 17 when Rachel entered the Carter family. His mother had passed away several years earlier, leaving Daniel to raise him alone. Rachel understood how delicate the situation was and never tried to replace the memory of Liam's mother. Instead, she approached the relationship slowly and carefully. She treated Liam with kindness, offered support when he needed help with schoolwork, and respected his space when he preferred quiet. Over time, Liam began to trust her. Their conversations started small, questions about books, homework, and music. But gradually they grew into thoughtful discussions about life, future goals, and personal worries. Rachel noticed that Liam was an intelligent and reflective young man who often thought deeply about the world around him. As the years passed, the relationship between them became warm and respectful, more like a friendship built on trust than a traditional stepmother and stepson dynamic. When Liam turned 19 and began attending a nearby college to study environmental science, Rachel felt proud watching him step confidently into adulthood. However, while that connection quietly strengthened, Rachel's marriage to Daniel slowly began to change in ways that were harder to see. Daniel's career became more demanding every year. New property deals, client meetings, and business trips filled his schedule. At first, Rachel admired his dedication, but eventually his long work hours began to create distance between them. The dinners they once shared turned into quick meals eaten separately. Weekend plans were often canceled at the last moment because of urgent phone calls. Sometimes Daniel would return home late at night, already exhausted, promising they would spend more time together soon, but that promise rarely came true. Rachel tried not to complain because she knew Daniel worked hard for their future, yet she could not ignore the quiet loneliness that slowly settled into the house. The large living room often felt too silent in the evenings. Rachel filled that silence by reading, tending to her small garden, and focusing on her work at the library. Another important person in the Carter family was Daniel's younger sister, Emily Harper. Emily lived in Seattle but visited Portland regularly for work and family events. She was 32, lively, confident, and naturally warm with people. Unlike Daniel, Emily had a gift for emotional connection. She noticed small details, asked thoughtful questions, and listened carefully when someone shared their feelings. From the moment Rachel met Emily during her first year of marriage, the two women developed an easy friendship. They often talked for hours over coffee, sharing stories about work, family memories, and life challenges. Emily admired Rachel's calm personality, while Rachel appreciated Emily's energy and honesty. Their friendship made Rachel feel less alone during Daniel's busy work seasons. One rainy Thursday in early spring, Emily called to say she would be visiting Portland for a marketing conference and wondered if she could stay at the Carter house for a few days. Rachel immediately welcomed the idea. She always enjoyed Emily's visits because the house felt brighter and more alive when she was around. Unfortunately, Daniel received a last-minute call the same afternoon informing him that he needed to fly to San Francisco for an important property deal that weekend. When he told Rachel about the trip, she forced a small smile and said she understood. Inside, however, she felt the familiar disappointment she had grown used to hiding. That evening, Emily arrived carrying a small travel bag and her usual cheerful attitude. She hugged Rachel warmly and immediately began chatting about the conference and her drive down from Seattle. Liam also came downstairs to greet her, and Rachel noticed how easily the two of them started talking. Emily asked Liam about college, his classes, and his plans for the future. Liam explained that he wanted to work in environmental conservation one day, possibly helping protect forests and wildlife across the Pacific Northwest. Emily listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that encouraged him to share more about his ideas. Rachel watched the conversation unfold while preparing dinner in the kitchen, feeling quietly happy to see Liam so engaged and confident. The three of them sat together at the kitchen table while rain tapped softly against the windows outside. Without Daniel's usual phone calls and work distractions, the dinner felt relaxed and peaceful. They laughed about small family stories and shared opinions about movies and books. For the first time in weeks, Rachel felt the house filled with warmth and conversation. The next day, the rain finally stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool. Emily suggested they all take a walk along the Willamette River downtown before her conference started the following afternoon. Rachel agreed, and soon the three of them were strolling along the river path under a pale blue sky. As they walked, Rachel noticed how naturally Emily and Liam connected with each other. Their humor matched easily, and their conversations moved from serious topics like environmental policy to light jokes about city life. Sometimes they walked slightly ahead of Rachel, deep in discussion, while she followed a few steps behind. Rachel did not feel uncomfortable about it, but she did begin noticing something she hadn't expected. There was a natural understanding between them, an easy flow of conversation that seemed almost effortless. Later that evening, after dinner, they gathered in the living room to watch an old movie Liam had recommended. During a short commercial break, Rachel glanced across the room and saw Emily and Liam talking quietly together. Their expressions looked thoughtful, almost serious, as if they were discussing something personal. Rachel felt a small flicker of curiosity, but decided not to interrupt. As the movie continued, she leaned back on the couch and listened to their occasional laughter and quiet conversations. At that moment, Rachel had no idea that the small connections forming inside the house during Daniel's absence would slowly grow into something far more complicated. She simply believed she was watching two family members enjoying each other's company. But deep inside, an instinct whispered that something subtle had begun changing in the atmosphere of the home. And as Rachel went upstairs later that night and turned off the bedroom light, she sensed that the peaceful days ahead might reveal emotions none of them fully understood yet. The following morning began quietly, but Rachel Carter sensed that something inside the house had shifted during the past 2 days, even though she could not clearly explain what it was. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window as she prepared coffee and toast, listening to the soft sounds of the house waking up. Emily came downstairs first, cheerful and energetic as always, talking about her upcoming conference presentation and how nervous she felt about speaking in front of a large audience. Rachel listened supportively while pouring coffee, offering small words of encouragement that made Emily smile. A few minutes later, Liam entered the kitchen, still slightly sleepy but clearly in a good mood. Rachel noticed how easily he and Emily began talking again, continuing a conversation about environmental issues they had started the day before. Emily seemed genuinely interested in Liam's ideas about conservation projects and climate awareness, asking thoughtful questions that encouraged him to speak more confidently. Rachel watched quietly from across the kitchen, stirring her coffee slowly. There was nothing wrong with the interaction. It felt natural, friendly, and respectful. Yet something about the way they connected made Rachel pause. It wasn't discomfort exactly. It was simply the sense that a deeper understanding had begun forming between them during Daniel's absence. Later that morning, Emily left for the conference downtown, promising she would return by early evening. Liam also left for college classes, leaving Rachel alone in the house again. As she cleaned the kitchen and prepared for work at the library, Rachel found herself thinking about the conversations she had observed. She reminded herself that it was normal for family members to connect easily, especially when they shared similar interests. Still, the quiet thought lingered in her mind longer than she expected. The day passed quickly at the library, where Rachel helped visitors find books and organized a new display for the reading club. Yet every now and then, her thoughts drifted back to the atmosphere at home. When she returned in the late afternoon, she found Liam already there in the living room, studying at the dining table. Emily arrived soon after, looking both excited and tired from her conference presentation. Rachel prepared dinner while the two of them talked about their day. Emily described the marketing strategy she had discussed during the conference, and Liam listened with genuine curiosity. Their conversation moved easily between professional topics and personal stories. Rachel joined the discussion when she could, but sometimes she simply listened, noticing how naturally they understood each other's humor and ideas. That evening after dinner, Emily suggested they play a simple board game she had brought from Seattle. The three of them gathered around the coffee table, laughing as the game progressed. Rachel enjoyed the light-hearted moment, yet she also noticed how often Emily and Liam shared quick smiles during the game, like two people who had discovered a shared rhythm of conversation and humor. The feeling still wasn't uncomfortable, but it was noticeable enough to make Rachel thoughtful. As the night grew later, Liam excused himself to finish some homework upstairs, while Emily and Rachel stayed in the living room with cups of tea. For a while they talked about ordinary things, work stress, family updates, and the difficulty of balancing personal happiness with busy careers. Then Emily grew quiet for a moment before speaking again. She admitted that watching Rachel manage the household and maintain patience with Daniel's busy schedule made her admire Rachel's strength. Emily explained that Daniel had always been focused on his work, even when they were younger, and sometimes she worried he didn't realize how much his absence affected the people around him. Rachel listened carefully, surprised by Emily's honesty. She had never openly complained about Daniel's schedule, but hearing Emily acknowledge it made Rachel feel both understood and slightly emotional. Rachel smiled gently and said that every marriage had its challenges, and she believed Daniel cared deeply, even if he struggled to show it through time and attention. Emily nodded thoughtfully, though her expression suggested she was still reflecting on the situation. Later that night, when Rachel went upstairs to prepare for bed, she passed Liam's room and heard him speaking softly on the phone. She didn't pay much attention until she heard Emily's name mentioned in the conversation. The tone of Liam's voice sounded thoughtful, almost reflective, as if he were describing their discussions and shared interests to a friend. Rachel paused briefly in the hallway, not to listen intentionally, but simply because the moment surprised her. Liam had always been reserved when talking about people, yet now he seemed energized by his conversations with Emily. Rachel quietly continued to her room without interrupting. The next day followed a similar rhythm. Emily attended the second day of her conference while Liam went to classes. Rachel worked at the library, but again she found herself replaying small moments from the past 2 days. When she returned home that evening, she discovered Liam and Emily already sitting in the living room, discussing environmental documentaries on television. Rachel joined them and listened as Liam passionately explained his dream of working in forest preservation projects across the Pacific Northwest. Emily encouraged him warmly, telling him that people who cared deeply about protecting nature were needed now more than ever. Rachel could see how much Liam appreciated the support. As the conversation continued, Rachel felt something unexpected inside her heart. It wasn't jealousy or anger. Instead, it was a complicated mix of curiosity and quiet awareness. She realized that the connection growing between Emily and Liam had created a new dynamic within the house, one that included Rachel as an observer, but also somehow placed her in the middle of something emotional she didn't yet understand. That night, as the three of them sat together watching another movie, Rachel noticed that the atmosphere in the room felt different from earlier in the week. The house was still warm and friendly, but beneath the laughter and casual conversation, there was a subtle emotional energy that none of them openly discussed. Rachel leaned back on the couch and glanced toward Emily and Liam across the room. They were sharing a quiet conversation again, their voices low and thoughtful. In that moment, Rachel realized something important. The unexpected bond forming within the family might eventually test their understanding of loyalty, honesty, and love. And although she didn't yet know how those emotions would unfold, Rachel sensed that the peaceful balance of the Carter household was slowly moving toward a turning point none of them were prepared to face. By the third day of Emily's visit, Rachel Carter could no longer ignore the quiet shift happening inside her home, though she still struggled to define exactly what it meant. The morning began like the others, calm and routine, but Rachel noticed small details more clearly now. Liam and Emily greeted each other with the comfortable ease of people who had already shared many conversations. Their discussions moved quickly from simple topics to deeper ideas about work, goals, and life choices. Rachel prepared breakfast while listening to them talk, noticing how Liam spoke more confidently around Emily than he usually did with most people. It wasn't inappropriate or disrespectful, but there was a warmth between them that felt surprisingly natural. Rachel reminded herself that they were simply two people discovering shared interests, yet the awareness remained in the back of her mind. Later that day, Emily finished the final session of her conference and returned to the house earlier than expected. Liam had also come home early from college after his last class was canceled. Rachel was still at the library, so the house was quiet when the two of them sat down in the living room with cups of coffee. Their conversation drifted toward personal topics again. Emily admitted that she sometimes felt unsure about her career path despite her professional success. Liam listened carefully, telling her that many people his age also worried about choosing the right direction in life. The conversation felt honest and reflective, the kind people rarely share unless they feel comfortable with each other. When Rachel returned home that afternoon, she noticed immediately how relaxed the atmosphere seemed. Emily and Liam were sitting at the kitchen table, discussing a documentary about environmental conservation. Rachel joined them with a friendly smile, and the conversation continued easily. Yet Rachel also sensed something deeper now, a quiet understanding between them that had formed quickly during the past few days. After dinner, Emily suggested they all go out for a short evening walk along the river again. The air was cool but pleasant, and the city lights reflected softly on the water. As they walked along the path, Rachel noticed that Liam and Emily once again moved slightly ahead while talking. This time their conversation appeared more serious, their voices thoughtful rather than playful. Rachel followed a few steps behind, giving them space, but also quietly observing the connection that had grown so quickly. She did not feel angry or threatened. Instead, she felt thoughtful and curious about what these changes might mean for the family dynamic. When they returned home, Rachel went to the kitchen to prepare tea, while Emily and Liam remained in the living room, continuing their discussion. Rachel could hear pieces of their conversation drifting through the hallway. They were talking about personal goals, relationships, and the challenges people face when trying to balance career success with emotional happiness. Their voices carried a tone of sincerity that made Rachel pause for a moment before bringing the tea into the room. The three of them sat together again, but Rachel could sense that something unspoken had begun forming beneath the surface. Later that night, Liam excused himself to finish some assignments upstairs. Emily stayed in the living room with Rachel, and for a while they talked quietly about family memories and childhood experiences. Then Emily hesitated before speaking again. She admitted that the past few days had made her reflect on her own life more deeply than she expected. Meeting Liam as an adult had surprised her because she remembered him as a quiet teenager years ago. Now she saw a thoughtful young man with strong ideas and a kind heart. Rachel listened carefully, sensing that Emily's words carried a deeper emotional layer. Emily quickly clarified that she respected family boundaries and valued the closeness they all shared, but she couldn't deny that she felt inspired by Liam's passion and sincerity. Rachel nodded slowly, understanding the complicated nature of human emotions. She appreciated Emily's honesty and responded calmly, explaining that connections between people sometimes appear unexpectedly, especially when they share similar interests and values. The important thing, Rachel said gently, was remembering the responsibilities that came with family relationships. Emily agreed immediately, assuring Rachel that she would never intentionally create discomfort or confusion within the family. The conversation ended on a thoughtful note, leaving both women quietly reflecting on the delicate balance between emotion and responsibility. The following evening, Daniel finally returned from his business trip. The house felt different the moment he walked through the door. bringing with him the familiar energy of his busy lifestyle. He greeted everyone warmly, but soon began talking about new property deals and upcoming meetings. Rachel listened politely while preparing dinner, noticing how quickly the rhythm of the household shifted back to Daniel's fast-paced world. During the meal, Liam mentioned some of the conversations he and Emily had shared about environmental work and future goals. Daniel nodded with mild interest, but quickly returned the discussion to his real estate projects. Emily smiled politely, though Rachel could tell she felt the contrast between Daniel's practical mindset and Liam's thoughtful curiosity. After dinner, Daniel took a work call in his office, leaving the others in the living room. Emily and Liam exchanged a brief glance that Rachel noticed immediately. It wasn't romantic or secretive, but it carried the quiet understanding of two people who had shared meaningful conversations during the past few days. Rachel suddenly realized something important. The unexpected bond forming within the family had not been created through dramatic actions or sudden decisions. Instead, it had grown slowly through shared ideas, mutual respect, and honest discussions about life. And Rachel herself had become part of that bond in an unexpected way. She had listened, observed, and helped guide the situation with patience rather than suspicion. That night, as Rachel prepared for bed beside Daniel, who was already asleep after his long trip, she reflected on everything that had happened during Emily's visit. She understood now that emotions between people could sometimes appear in complicated forms, even within families. Yet she also believed that honesty and understanding could protect relationships from turning into conflict. As she turned off the bedside lamp and listened to the quiet house around her, Rachel sensed that the true challenge of the situation had not yet arrived, because the bond between her, Liam, and Emily was still evolving, and soon they would all have to decide how that connection would shape the future of their family. The days that followed Daniel's return slowly brought clarity to the emotions that had quietly grown inside the Carter household, and Rachel Carter began to understand that the unexpected bond between herself, Liam, and Emily had never been about crossing lines, but about revealing truths that had been hidden for a long time. Life quickly returned to its usual rhythm, yet Rachel noticed that she now saw everything with sharper awareness. Daniel resumed his busy routine of phone calls, meetings, and long hours away from home, and although he spoke kindly when he was present, the emotional distance between him and Rachel was now impossible to ignore. Emily stayed for 2 more days before returning to Seattle, and during that time, the atmosphere in the house remained warm but thoughtful. Everyone seemed aware that something meaningful had happened during the past week, though no one rushed to define it too quickly. One evening, the 3 of them sat together on the back porch, watching the quiet Portland sunset paint soft colors across the sky. Liam spoke about his plans for the future with a calm confidence Rachel had not seen before. He explained that the conversations with Emily had encouraged him to pursue an internship with an environmental organization the following summer. Emily smiled proudly and told him that passion and dedication were more important than following a predictable path. Rachel listened quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and reflection. She realized that the bond forming between them had strengthened Liam's confidence and reminded her of the importance of emotional support in people's lives. Later that night, Emily asked Rachel if they could talk privately before she left the next morning. They sat together in the living room while the house remained silent around them. Emily spoke honestly, explaining that the past week had surprised her in many ways. She had arrived expecting a simple family visit, but instead she found herself deeply inspired by Liam's thoughtful outlook on life and Rachel's quiet strength in maintaining patience within a complicated marriage. Emily admitted that the connection she felt during those conversations was emotional rather than romantic, something closer to admiration and understanding. Rachel appreciated the honesty and told Emily she had never believed anything inappropriate was happening. Instead, Rachel explained that the situation had simply revealed something important about all of them. Emily had reminded Liam that his ideas mattered and deserved encouragement, while Liam had reminded Emily that passion and sincerity still existed in the world beyond busy careers and city life. And Rachel herself had discovered a deeper truth about her own life. Watching the connection between them had forced her to face the loneliness she had quietly accepted in her marriage with Daniel. Emily listened carefully, then gently asked Rachel a question she had never asked before. Was Rachel truly happy with the life she was living now? Or had she simply grown comfortable with the routine of waiting for Daniel's attention? The question lingered in the air for a long moment before Rachel answered. She admitted that she still cared for Daniel, but the emotional partnership they once shared had slowly disappeared. The events of the past week had made her realize that she deserved a relationship where conversation, support, and shared time were not rare moments, but daily parts of life. Emily squeezed Rachel's hand supportively and reminded her that recognizing the truth about one's feelings was often the first step toward change. The next morning, Emily hugged Rachel and Liam goodbye before driving back to Seattle. The house felt quieter after her departure, but the silence now carried a different meaning. Later that evening, Rachel asked Daniel if they could talk seriously about their marriage. At first he seemed surprised, but as Rachel calmly explained how lonely she had felt over the past few years, Daniel slowly began to understand the depth of her feelings. She told him about the conversations she had shared with Emily and Liam, not as accusations, but as reflections that helped her see her own life more clearly. Daniel listened carefully, realizing that his dedication to work had slowly created distance he never intended. The conversation was long and honest, filled with moments of regret, but also understanding. Daniel admitted that he had become so focused on providing financial success that he forgot the emotional connection that made their marriage meaningful in the first place. Rachel appreciated his honesty, but she also explained that rebuilding trust and closeness would require real effort from both of them. Over the following weeks, Daniel began making small but genuine changes. He reduced some travel, spent more evenings at home, and started joining Rachel for simple activities like walks in the neighborhood or quiet dinners together. Liam also noticed the shift in the household. The conversations at the dinner table grew longer, and the atmosphere felt lighter than it had in years. Occasionally, Liam would update them about his environmental studies or share messages from Emily, who continued encouraging him from Seattle. Rachel realized that the unexpected bond that had formed during Emily's visit had not destroyed the family, but had quietly guided everyone toward important truths. It helped Liam gain confidence in his future, reminded Emily of the value of sincere connections, and allowed Rachel and Daniel to confront the emotional distance they had ignored for too long. One evening, several weeks later, Rachel sat on the back porch again, the same place where they had watched the sunset days earlier. Daniel joined her with 2 cups of tea, and they talked calmly about their plans for the future. The air felt peaceful, not because life had become perfect, but because honesty had replaced the silence that once filled the house. Rachel realized that the story of the unexpected bond with her stepson and sister-in-law was never truly about infidelity. Instead, it was about how human connections sometimes reveal hidden emotions that people are afraid to face, and in the Carter family, that bond had quietly helped each of them understand what loyalty, love, and emotional honesty truly meant.